mission of City Club is to inform, connect, and engage our community to strengthen the civic health of our region. We emphasize civil conversations and listening to others. We begin by acknowledging with humility that the land where we are today is the territory of the people of the Salish Sea. Their presence is imbued in the waterways, shorelines, valleys, and mountains of the traditional homelands of the Coast Salish people, and it has been that way since time immemorial. As always, I'd like to thank all our volunteers who make programs possible. As always, I'd like to thank KMRE board member Robert Clark, who's producing today's program, and BTV10, who will be broadcasting it to their viewers. I'd like to thank our sponsors for their support. First, we have our first supporting member of City Club announced today. That's Peace Health Medical Center, who is sponsoring us at a higher level. And then our contributing members, they are Bruce and Claudia Diezend, Danny Neal, of real estate broker with the Moyat Group, the Firehouse Arts and Events Center, Colshan CPAs, Opportunity Council, Pacific Continental Realty, Unity Care Northwest, Village Books, Western Washington University, Whatcom Community College, and the Whatcom Community Foundation.
Our November program will be Children's Health, Post-COVID, Building Resilience to Them and Ourselves. And Dr. Kyra Moseth of Seattle University will address how to use practical approaches to build resilience after disruptive events like COVID and to deal with life's tensions. Please note that the November program will be on the 15th of the month, so it'll be a week earlier because of Thanksgiving. So with that, I'd like to introduce today's moderator, Christine Perkins.
Thank you. Good morning. So excited for this topic, and I'm glad you're all here to talk with us today about artificial intelligence. Once the stuff of science fiction writers' imaginations, artificial intelligence has really taken off in the recent years, with AI applications like advanced search engines, recommendation systems, speech recognition, generative tools, even self-driving vehicles, becoming more common or even ubiquitous in daily life. Scientists and medical researchers see limitless potential. Corporations see dollar signs. And ethicists and sociologists wonder how the widespread use of AI will impact society and humanity. Today, we welcome Amy Dimond, who is a data and artificial intelligence specialist at Microsoft Corporation, to give us an introduction to artificial intelligence, what it is, how it works, and how it already is a big part of our lives. She'll describe Microsoft's approach to responsible AI and provide insights into the rapid changes that AI is making to today's technology. Amy earned her electrical engineering degree from Oregon State University. I hear she has some special knowledge of oscilloscopes. Did I get that right? And has invented some interesting technology herself. She's worked for over 30 years in technology at Oracle and EMC, as well as Microsoft, developing AI business solutions in the fields of healthcare, retail, manufacturing, transportation, and logistics. She's a passionate advocate for the use of innovative technologies that improve collaboration, productivity, and creativity. She and her husband, John, split their time between Oregon and here in Washington, and like to be in Bellingham and the Salish Sea as much as possible. So please join me in welcoming Amy Dimond.
So as Christine mentioned, the goal of this is to create some awareness around artificial intelligence, as well as the key things to think about from an ethical perspective as we create the systems and work with companies and our communities. Brad Smith is the president of Microsoft, and he co-wrote this book. I really like the way he's looking at this. When technology changes the world, you bear responsibility to help address the world that you create. It kind of reminds me of Spider-Man in that with great power comes great responsibility. And Microsoft and a lot of the other technology companies have taken this to heart. As we all know, the age of AI is here. Artificial intelligence is the ability of machines or software to perform tasks that normally you associate with humans. So things like image recognition, understanding language, making decisions, and learning from data. It's a broad umbrella, and under that umbrella, there's some specific technologies, things like machine learning, where you're using advanced algorithms against huge amount of data to predict outcomes. Deep learning is another, it's a more sophisticated type of machine learning. I'm not going to go into that, neural networks, and my technical data scientist isn't here with me. But what's got everyone excited is generative AI. So the ability to leverage large language models to generate content, images, software code. So as we all know, AI is helping everything be more convenient. Companies are seeing rise in productivity, and social expectations are evolving, as well as government regulations. It's changing industries and business models, disruption, and right now technology is at an inflection point. If we look back a few years ago, a lot of companies had already invested in the digital foundation for this. Data, they had data governance and all of that in place. But now with this new level of AI, more structure is needed to make sure everything's protected. So I know we may talk a little bit about jobs today. The companies that we're working with, 87% of them believe AI will give them a competitive advantage. A lot of the customers that I'm working with are striving to get their handle on this technology so that they're not missing out on the opportunity and losing to their competition. A lot of the employees are also excited to leverage technology. Microsoft does a work trend index, and surveying 30,000 companies across the United States. And one of the things that they found is that employees are overwhelmed. We don't have, because we're needing to spend so much time in communication and basic administration tasks, we aren't able to spend as much time really delivering value. So employees are actually excited about the productivity, and employers are looking to augment their staff, they're more looking to improve the productivity versus cut jobs, is how a lot of the leaders that we've been talking to are looking at this. One of the benefits of some of the AI technology is accessibility and inclusion. With chatbots and code generation is now easier, so some folks that may not have been able to have access to higher education or learning opportunities to generate code have this ability now. Voice input and image recognition for folks that have disabilities in certain areas. One of the stories I like is about this chatbot that was developed for India to help farmers gain access to government resources. And because of the text translation, they were able to have this chatbot service with 22 languages in India. As we know, with all of this, the social expectations are increasing, as well as governments are now looking at regulating AI. So wanted to tell you a little bit about Microsoft's approach. We don't need to go into all of the details, but what I like is that the leadership at Microsoft 8 years ago or so had already decided that this was important, that responsible AI was something that we needed to invest in and go after. It's not reactive at this point. Even in the past, they began looking at advocating for regulations within the government. So we developed a set of 6 principles: fairness, reliability, privacy and security, inclusiveness, transparency, and accountability. There is a special focus on these sensitive uses. So when you think about consequential impact to folks, making sure that they have access to, when you're looking at systems that might contribute to resources that are allocated, whether people are able to get into college, have access to health care, able to get a loan, making sure that those are fair and the use of artificial intelligence doesn't leave people out of those. Situations where it could be physical injury or harm, that's a sensitive use case. And sensitive use cases within Microsoft, we have hundreds of people that are focused on responsible AI. I'll take you through a couple of the other things with framework. But if there's a sensitive use case that comes up, it is flagged, and there's extra attention that needs to be paid to that. The last one is threat to human rights, as you might imagine. Or we realized that principles alone are not enough. It's great to say that you want to make sure that things are fair and unbiased and it's safe and take care of privacy. Those all sound great. But unless you create a strong framework to make that happen, it's not really all that relevant. And so we know that they're not self-executing, they are open to interpretation, and the real thing is the how. So what Microsoft did is we put together tools and processes, trainings and practices. I think Microsoft has over 125,000 employees, and everybody has been trained on responsible AI. There are rules and governance that we take very seriously. I won't go into the individual pieces here, but for each of our principles, we have very specific things. And I was actually happy to see that. So for example, accountability is we are accountable to make sure that the software that we develop and sell and partner with our customers is safe and accurate and fitting the purpose. And so some of the things that we do for that, there'll be impact assessments. They sit down, the developers have a committee where they sit down and they analyze who are the stakeholders. There's the obvious stakeholders for a given application, but what they try to do is understand the extended group of stakeholders and how each of these things might impact. And so they do that before they even go through the design process. And so again, with some of the others you can see there, making sure there's quality of service, making sure that with failures, in past software, people would think about reliability as the software working. But because these AI systems are so critical and have the potential to harm or leave people out, it's important to not just make sure that they're performing as planned, but taking into consideration what if it fails and mitigating those risks. Within Microsoft, we have a hub and spoke model. So again, taking this very seriously. We have a whole Office of Responsible AI. We've got the Aether community, and these are thought leaders within Microsoft that are thinking strategically and getting ahead. So the Office of Responsible AI is more around governance. And then RAISE, which is the engineering tools. And again, as I was learning about this myself, I was surprised at how many tools we use in order to check things. So like one of the challenges with AI could be data. Data is very critical, and that's what's bringing all this strong benefits. And so if data is so key to that, you want to make sure that it's protected, that it's set up in such a way that it's unbiased. And so there are actually tools. I'm trying to think of a good example here. An example of bias might be if you're training a model on a data set that isn't broad enough. So for example, maybe it's a data set of CEOs, and there might be more men than women. If you train a model on that, those biases may come up. And so one of the things that these tools do is there's tools that will analyze the data and to see if you've got enough of that. There's tools and processes. So it's more than just wanting to be fair and wanting to be ensure privacy and security. So again, because AI has so much power to potentially have negative impact, we're really trying to make sure that we're focused on human rights and make sure that people aren't discriminated against, free from privacy invasions, freedom of association. Okay, so as Microsoft was developing our responsible AI standard, we were looking again at the principles, then analyzing the goals, the requirements, as well as the tools and practices in order to determine the outcomes that we need to secure and the specific steps that need to be taken. So public policy. There is a growing focus on regulatory attention, and Microsoft is working to shape and adapt that regulation, and working with the other technology giants. As I mentioned in the first slide, we have a responsibility as the people that are driving a lot of this technology to ensure the outcomes, and we're working with the other technology companies in advocating for more regulations. So really putting our principles to work: the governance system, new research and policies, innovative technology, and then the tools for not just Microsoft internally to analyze and protect and mitigate risk, but also for our customers. One example that I was thinking about today is that not only do we need to make sure that we're developing safely, but we put restrictions on what our customers are able to do. So for example, when ChatGPT came out and everyone was super excited about it, so Microsoft has a relationship with OpenAI. We invested billions in OpenAI, and then we also took OpenAI and brought it under our own umbrella. So Azure OpenAI, where Microsoft it's in the Microsoft Azure framework, so provides all the security and enterprise governance around it. Everybody wanted access to Azure OpenAI to start playing around with it and do things for their company. They had to request access from us. It wasn't something that we just gave because our customers wanted to access these services. The customers would have to would actually need to be very specific about what their use case was. And because we wanted to make sure there weren't sensitive use cases and they were using these powerful technologies for good. I think these last slides just really have to do with examples of some of the biases. I don't think I'll go into them. Maybe we'll talk about them in some of the questions. Is now a good time to stop? Okay, thanks.
Okay, well, thank you very much, Amy, for that background on this topic. Our City Club Programming Committee developed a list of questions because we're really into this topic. And so I thought we'd spend a little bit of time here going over the questions that we've prepared, but I hope that you are thinking in your own head of questions that you also have for our speaker. We'll have time in a little while for questions from the audience, so be thinking of those. So if we could just kind of go way back to the beginning of this topic on AI. I just want to make sure we're all sharing the same common vocabulary and really understanding what AI is. We throw it out a lot, but what really is it? Really, is it a computer program? Is that a thing? Is it a whole bunch of ones and zeros? How would you describe what AI is?
Yes, I would describe it as, well, it's very broad, but it does involve a computer program and the ability to leverage large amounts of data. It could be anything from, there's a set of AI tools called cognitive services, which has to do with image recognition, so computer vision, speech to text, a lot of the stuff that we might be used to in translation services. So cognitive services is their own branch. But yes, basically it's software, technology, and data that allows us to do different things like humans would have, that normally you would think of humans. So like I said, understand language, make predictions based on the data and the advanced analytics. In some ways, I guess coming from an analytics background, I think of AI as more of advanced analytics. You've got a ton of data and algorithms and things that you can run against the data to make decisions. If I think about maybe more of the science fiction, like robotics uses a particular kind of machine learning called reinforcement learning. It's the type of thing where you create models that the software will make a decision, will do something, and actually maybe this was a bad example because it sounds a little complicated, but the software will make a decision to do something, And based on the programming code, it will either reward or discipline them. And so then it takes it in a different direction. I used a really too complicated one, so disregard the robot.
Okay, so basically computer program. You mentioned algorithms. So for those of us who haven't taken a mathematics course in a long time or any computer science, how do you describe an algorithm to us?
Okay, so
Look at this, we're using AI right now. The big search engine is,
Okay.
it predicted what she was typing, so that's using AI. It's looking at the character she's typed in and predicting what the rest of the word is going to be. It's getting reaffirmed by what she clicks on.
But yes, we use AI. Think about also like the Roomba vacuum, being able to figure out where to go in the house. The guessing the next word in the texting, all of this.
Mm-hmm.
Okay,
Yeah, so
anyway.
a lot of times we want to turn that off, right? Some of us of a certain age are like, don't guess what I want to say. How could you possibly know? Oh, sure. The algorithm here, it says a well-defined sequential computational technique that accepts a value or collection of values as input and produces the outputs needed to solve a problem, and then repeats it over and over again. If you have a calculation that you figured out, then your algorithm, you can keep running that algorithm to have it do more work for you. Is that clear as mud? Yes. Okay. So, okay, we had that. Another term you were talking about earlier. An algorithm is a sequence of precise instructions that tell a computer how to solve a problem or accomplish a task.
So one thing I'll point out here is that with these large language models, there's a whole new science called prompt engineering. And it's really around asking the right questions, providing context. So because I provided that context, it gave us a better answer. You also have the ability to reference documents. And I've heard from someone recently that it's very tempting. Well, if you're into this sort of thing, it might be very tempting to go learn all about prompt engineering or take classes or do sophisticated stuff. But one of the folks I was talking to says just use it. Just try using it, and you'll figure out how to ask better questions to get what you want.
Spotted well. It gave her the answer that we wanted. And it's interesting here. Look at this. It tells her that her answer is appropriate for people 13 to 18 years old. Right? Grades 8 to 12, so that's good. So anyway, maybe that is actually referring to the website where that definition is from, but no matter. It worked for us, right? This one makes more sense. So we were using generative AI to come up with the answer there. So you talked about a Roomba going around finding the edges of your room and vacuuming. Autocorrect or some of the predictive text when you're starting to send a text to somebody and it fills in the answer or it fills in what you're searching for. Can you think of other applications for AI, maybe in a medical field, or where else does AI get used?
One area, well, within the medical field that people are pretty excited about is in, I guess, two ways. I was going to say in scientific research, when you think about how much data and documents and information that you need to be able to comprehend in order to come up with new cures and new advancements in science in general and in healthcare. The ability for AI to take advantage of the sheer power of computing and these large language models to go after all this documentation. So I would say making huge strides in scientific discovery. From a healthcare perspective, it might be diagnosing an illness. It's because of the AI capabilities, it can recognize things that the human may not be able to. One thing that I would say is with healthcare, because it's very critical and could cause issues with folks, that you can't just rely on the AI to do that. So that's one of the risk mitigations that people need to put in place is, yes, you can leverage AI and maybe it'll do a better job of catching that illness soon, but you don't. The harm of a misdiagnosis is just as bad, and so we need to be able to diagnose it, but also find other facts, other data points to validate that diagnosis is on track.
And using a human trained physician to confirm or follow up on what the algorithm or the AI has indicated.
Yes, we always talk about keeping the human in the loop. In addition to that, there'll be, depending on the type of thing that you're the type of thing that you're looking at, it may not always be just a human validating. There could be other methods of testing to confirm the diagnosis.
More AI.
Yes.
Right. Okay. But double checks or triple checks of your AI. Okay. So medical research or research in general would be a field. Are there any things just in our day-to-day life that you, besides Roombas, that you can think of where AI is popping up?
Well, you actually brought up a good one, and maybe because shopping is near and dear to my heart, but being able to make some of those personalized recommendations. When we think about when you're on searching on a store, you're at Amazon or anything else, being able to notice the trends in what you tend to like and being able to recognize that next best thing. Why am I blacking out?
Well, so you'll see that often, right? You search one time for, I don't know, slippers, and the next thing you know, you're getting lots of ads for slippers. So some people could say that's creepy. My computer knows way too much about my shoe size. And other people may say, you just saved me a whole bunch of time. I need slippers. I'm trying to find good ones, and you just identified the sale. So that can help you. Okay, so I just want to circle back to one other term. You talked about chatbots earlier, and I think a lot of us have heard that term, but what exactly is a chatbot, and where would you run into one?
A chatbot, where I believe we usually run into them would be on the internet. If customer service is a popular place for chatbot. So if you're engaging, well, let's think about a case of maybe an airline or actually any sort of company that maybe you're doing an online again purchasing. Usually you'll see over there's chat with us, and a chatbot is an automated way. So there isn't usually a person on the other end of that chat interacting with you. It's a computer program, and what they do, and there's a lot of different levels of sophistication, but they set up at the basic level, set up kind of a question. Oh. See, that's an example. But yeah, so chatbots, computer program that can interact with you. A lot of times it's based on a set amount of, from a very basic point, you may have a set of questions and answers that are traditionally used. But more and more the expectation is that it's conversational. They want, the companies feel that the customer experience will be more rewarding if it seems like you're talking to a person. So again, with AI and these large language models, being able even to do sentiment analysis. So if I'm a customer and I'm chatting online and I'm angry, the words may come across as angry, and they can change, the chatbots will change how they interact with you in order to
They'll change their vocabulary, right? Instead of saying, oh, it sounds like you're really upset.
Exactly.
Is it changing on the screen as we talk? Yeah, they're trying to recognize it. So have you all had that experience? You've been online and you're saying, I need to cancel my hotel room, and it says chat with me, and you're chatting away. Just like Amy did, you put in, please will you shut down my hotel room, and you feel like there's somebody in Cincinnati who's there responding to you. It's actually just a predetermined algorithm that's picking words out of what you typed in and coming up with the most likely thing that you're asking and giving you the most likely answer. But sometimes they're off the mark, right? And you say, no, that's not what I'm talking about, it's this. And then they get more clues to help figure out what the correct answer would be. And they just keep learning from what you're typing and sharing with them to give you the right answer. And ultimately, in fine print at the very bottom, there might be an 800 number you can call if you really need. Yeah. If you can figure out which number to press, you're all set. Okay, so AI has really been in the news recently because of the SAG-AFTRA strike, partly because of the perceived threat of AI to Hollywood screenwriters. So, Amy, I'm wondering if you feel that there is a danger that AI-created work will become so sophisticated as to be indistinguishable from human-generated content. Maybe the chat box is so good you really do think there's someone there talking to you, or the movie that you're watching was created by a real person. Is that possible? Do we think we're going to get that good at AI?
It's hard to predict the future. What I would say right now is because a lot of people believe that we are far from that. That right now, when you're looking at these large language models, they're not creating unique content. What they're doing is they're going out and analyzing and picking content that is already out there. So there's a lot of people that feel that the strength and the human emotion and ability to create things that aren't there, that it's maybe in the future, but that we're pretty far from that. So I think the important thing would be focusing on again, regulations and certain workers fighting for what they want. We do need to protect our content. An example could be if you think about voice, I'm trying to remember the name of it now, but neural voice. Doesn't really matter. Think about if I were to record my voice, and it doesn't have to just be for a song or for something, but if someone were to capture the sound of my voice, I would want to protect that so it's not used against me. So there's voice actors that are okay with people using their voice for other ways and not just them acting in that moment. But what they do, as long as they're paid fairly, as long as they're compensated for the use of their voice. And so one of the things that's important now is there is technology to create kind of watermarks. So it's proving that is your voice. And Microsoft, with our programs, one of the things that we require of the people leveraging some of these tools is that the voice actor actually has to say, again, my name is Amy, and this is my voice, and I'm giving you the right to use it. And so as long as people are paid fairly, and we're securing that, there are a lot of people that feel okay. So I think it's going to be evolving, but I think that we're far from being able to take the human emotion and creative content out of it.
I think I read a story recently about the woman who she's used on almost just hundreds and hundreds of thousands of voicemail systems. She's the one who says, for English, press 1, and her voice just pops up all over the place, and she thought she was doing it for one place, and it's now being used everywhere. So it'll be important for people like her who are doing that work to have a way to get reimbursed. Yeah. Compensated. Okay, so you mentioned legislation related to AI, and I thought it was interesting on the map that Washington State is one of the only 2 states that actually have passed legislation about AI. I don't want to put you on the spot, but do you happen to know what is it about Washington State? Is it because Microsoft is here? We have a tech industry. Why are we one of the early adopters of this?
Well, I did actually ask Microsoft internal ChatGPT that question, and they did guess that it's because maybe a high percentage of technology companies like Microsoft in Washington. Other than that, I don't know. I think you're just going to see more and more. There is a lot of focus on it, and I know that some people are wondering, should this be a federal thing, or should it be states' rights? And I think that's still up for debate. I'm not an expert in government. I would imagine that states being able to enact these regulations, they could probably do it quicker and get things going, and we can learn from what certain states are doing. On the other hand, this thing is so big that to me, in my personal impression, it really should be controlled at a federal level at some point.
Got it.
What about the UN?
Okay, that was a question. What about the UN? Should the UN get their fingers in this?
I'm not an expert in any of that, but I have been watching Brad Smith, again, the president of Microsoft, because he's been involved in a lot of these discussions. And he and others are advocating for that sort of thing, because we all have to work together to ensure the safety. And again, keeping the human in the loop, being able to make sure that we can slow things down when they need or turn things off. So I think that maybe having more and more people outside just our country is important. But again, I'm not an expert in government.
Sure. So with the SAG-AFTRA strike, part of the issue was screenwriters and other people doing creative work getting compensated for their work. But there's also a fear in other industries that AI is just going to replace the worker altogether, that people were going to be out of jobs. Is there any upside or gain for people whose jobs are lost to AI? Where can they look for the future? Shining shoes, I heard over here.
Well, I think there's going to be a whole new different set of jobs. You know, when you first started asking the question, I was thinking in terms of I think it'll take some time. I don't think tomorrow all of a sudden all these jobs are going to be lost. And so when I'm thinking about the customers and the companies that I'm working with, as I mentioned, a lot of the folks in leadership aren't looking to reduce headcount right away. They're trying to get more value out of the people that are there. And so if I'm working in a company, in a job where it seems like AI might be able to replace me, what I would be trying to do is look at ways. I think it's going to be important for people to adapt. So I would be looking at ways to have this technology help me and maybe change what I'm doing either within that company or the approach. I mean, we're certainly going to need more data scientists and all sorts of techie jobs, but I think that I think there's a lot of opportunity to just take the creative and productivity help just to provide better output. If you're talking about the people that are laid off and then all of a sudden you're starting from scratch, that's definitely a hard thing.
Are there any jobs that you can think of that are AI proof? And we talked about shining shoes, some of the construction maybe. Does Microsoft talk about, don't worry, these are these things are still around, or is that not really on the?
Let's see, I'm trying to think. One of the things that I thought about or I've seen is perhaps things like in healthcare industry, probably not going to be replacing doctors. They might not need as many image technicians and things like that. It's hard to guess what might actually be AI proof. But again, I think the focus is on augmenting. With Microsoft, we call it co-pilots. And so what we've done is we embed AI in all of our products. And so as most people are probably familiar with the modern work, the Office, Office, PowerPoint, all of those kind of applications. And the AI we infuse in the products, we call them co-pilots. They're not automated pilots. They're not doing the work for us. They're just making it easier.
Got it. So you talked about the vast amounts of data that a lot of this AI is built on, is referencing for its work. How did Microsoft or Amazon or whoever's creating the AI get their hands on all that data? I mean, Amazon, I guess, is obvious to me. You shop and they pay attention. I'm just wondering about how aware people are that their data is being collected and is now being used for AI, and what rights, if anything, do we have about getting our data, allowing our data to be used for AI?
Well, I think so. the data that we're talking about, so for example, with ChatGPT, and it's going after all data that's accessible on the internet. And so that is already something that if you have your data accessible to the internet, you're exposed, AI aside. And so I think that what we need to do as individuals or companies is protect the data that we want to protect. And so I work with a lot of companies on data governance strategies, and again, tight security and privacy, who has access to what data. And so even if it's a company, when they're looking at leveraging AI within their own company, they're trying to make sure that their company data is their data. So and I know I'm kind of switching this to a company, but just looking at it through the lens of a corporation, I would see it kind of the same as people. But when they're talking about, let's say they leverage the Microsoft version of ChatGPT, their question is, how vulnerable is our data? And their data is their data. Microsoft's not doing anything with their data. Their data is not being leveraged to train the models that are out in the world. And so I think it really just comes down to traditional privacy, security, and if you've got secrets, you should keep them to yourself.
Got it. Well, and as you mentioned, so I guess AI is accessing the vast amount of information that's freely available on the internet. We have Internet Public Library. I'm a librarian. Has all sorts of copyright-free books, and ChatGPT can look at all of those, and then you can say, write me a modern day telling of some book that's now no longer covered by copyright, and it will do that for you. So there's so much out there that it can use to learn and improve upon itself. So, okay, so I'm wondering about how AI changes teaching and learning and what skills are going to be needed in the future.
I think there is a lot of opportunity in the education. When I was first thinking about education, you think in terms of, I've got a stepson who is a senior in high school, and the ability to leverage these tools to take shortcuts. I think that's maybe sometimes what a lot of people think about when it comes to that. Is it going to perhaps dumb down kids and that sort of thing? But I think there is a ton of opportunity for AI to identify learning challenges of individuals, because they're picking up these patterns and able to recognize it quicker, able to tailor programs to certain styles and learning styles of folks. It would be able to, if you look at the teacher's time, and I'm not a teacher, but what I understand is there is a ton of time spent not interacting with the kids. And so if we can make it easier for them to grade papers or to develop curriculum or that sort of thing, and they can spend more time face-to-face with kids, then that would be great.
Great. It just seems like AI is being talked about and on everybody's minds a lot recently, and I'm wondering if there's something different about the last few years that has caused the escalation of AI.
I think it's the vast amount of data that we have access to, the cloud and extreme levels of compute that is needed to create this. There's a lot, and I believe that there's a lot of momentum in technology, so that the technical companies that are coming up with these products, it kind of feeds on each other. So new technologies create new technologies, but I think the biggest piece is the huge amount of data and availability of high power computing.
Tons of data. Okay. Yeah. So this one just came out in the news maybe yesterday or the day before, that the state of Washington is joining 32 other states in suing Meta for the harm that they claim that Meta and its social media products have done for youth mental health, and saying that Meta has deliberately designed addictive features, and that's causing psychological injury, which is one of the things that you talked about. So how would the frameworks that companies like Microsoft are putting into place help ensure that the company is not adding to youth mental health?
So let's see, I guess what I would think about is going back to the principles. And so as the developers are creating a program or set of programs, again, first they need to identify stakeholders, and not just the stakeholders, the obvious stakeholders, the children, but the extended stakeholders could be, family and schoolmates and things that they interact with. So identifying the stakeholders and then trying to picture the potential risks. So really thinking through that ahead on the design of the products, and then putting a governance framework in place. I'm trying to think about that specifically, how you would protect against what they're saying. What are they?
They're saying that they deliberately designed addictive features so that they've used psychology to figure something where teens or kids are going to keep clicking. The fact that you can scroll unlimitedly, so you can doom scroll, you can just keep going, it doesn't ever stop, kind of perpetuates that need to want to keep doing that, et cetera. And they haven't they didn't stop and say, wow, I'm noticing that kids are spending hours and hours and hours on this. Maybe that's not a good idea.
Yeah, so it's just a matter of trying to figure out what the possible outcomes would be up front, making intentional decisions to avoid that sort of thing, and putting parameters in place in the programs to not let them do things like that. And I think that this sort of thing, as it happens and it's brought to our attention, companies will be more aware. This kind of goes to the regulation too. So if they sue and they lose, that impacts what other technology companies will do in the future.
So the lawsuit process is important and helpful to help guide corporations in what they're doing. And they don't want to lose a competitive advantage, but then if regulatorily, is that a word, they aren't able to do X, Y, or Z, and no one is able to do X, Y, or Z, then that might eliminate that competitive advantage. I don't think we're ready for like a real in-depth scientific discussion about large language models, but we're just wondering, what is that and how is it different from other forms of AI?
It's really about content generation. So it's leveraging all the data out there to either create images, create language, and develop code. So it's different from machine learning, because machine learning is analyzing data, running the algorithms, which you helped us understand, and to predict things. So there's just different types of AI. Again, cognitive services, looking at speech to text or facial recognition. Machine learning to make predictions. Large language models are just about content creation, synthesizing data that's already out there. I should be specific about that, not creating anything new.
Is it specific to language, like it's all word-based, or is that just meaning a vaster pool and creating more content out of it?
Correct. It's not just, if I understand your question,
it's not just words.
It's not just words. It could be images or even code, software.
So I was doom scrolling this morning on my Facebook feed, and I saw some ad pop up when it said, it was a reel. It was a video. And it was a woman in a beautiful ball gown standing on front of a soccer field. And she said, look at me in front of the soccer field. And she says, look what I can do. And she says, I want to be in front of a beautiful castle. And then she presses a button, and behind her, gone are the bleachers, gone is the goalpost, it's a castle. And then she says, and I would like a rainbow coming out of the trees over here. And whoop, there goes a rainbow. And oh, there's somebody standing in the corner. I want them erased out of my picture. And this is all using generative large language model to create new content, a picture of something that looks real because she's real and she's moving and talking, but the whole background around her is not actually any place you could ever find.
It's actually just Photoshop.
Yeah, that's just, so that's probably a simple or a common one. Yeah. You too can get it for $129 or whatever. Yeah. Okay. So we are getting to the point where we have the ability to take questions from the audience. And so I'm going to ask my microphone passer arounders to pass around the microphone. And I think we're all at this kind of similar level of understanding of AI. So let's try to keep it at that level.
I'd like to thank you for your presentation, and in particular, the sideboards and regulations that Microsoft has put into effect. My question is, well, I guess it's a two-part question. First, is it safe to assume that this is a type of regulatory regime that Microsoft would accept if Congress were to do such, number one? Number two, Microsoft and other AI users are multinational or perhaps transnational and not beholden. How do we protect against the folks out there who don't have the sideboards that Microsoft has?
I'm trying to see if I understand your question. Is the question about how would companies is the question that because of, actually I'm not sure I understand the question. Do you, Christine?
I think I got it, Dan.
Okay, good.
So sounds like there's several states and maybe nationally looking at legislation related to AI. Is this something Microsoft is open and amenable to and willing to follow, or are they going to fight it in court and say, we don't like the regulation that you're coming up with, we don't want to do it? And then the second is, because Microsoft and others operate on a global level, how does that work when they're trying to follow rules here in the United States, but other countries with a different set of regulations may allow businesses in their countries to get away with stuff that we don't think is okay here in the US? Is that right?
Good job, Christine. Okay, so now let's see what my answer. So from what I understand, again, I'm not in official capacity from Microsoft Legal, but from what I've seen with our president in his, what I've heard internally and also seen him speak publicly about, is he and Satya are advocating strongly for regulations. What I think that they will do, and any technology company, is if things are holding or hampering technology or advancements too much, they would probably push back on that. And so I think that I believe the thought is to come up with a good balance of not holding everything back, but being able to make sure that everything is safe and control, and humans in the loop and all of that. So I think what they'll probably do is look for the right balance. And then, the second one.
Was the international?
Yeah. I'm thinking in terms of maybe the context of what we do now. I don't know if this is a completely good example, but when we're looking at some data privacy and data rules, those vary state to state, but also internationally. And so I think that I think it might depend on what they're trying to accomplish. If they're trying to accomplish something that's specific to Europe, for example, because they have stronger data privacy, a company like Microsoft might need to tailor certain things to that. Alternatively, if what they may need to do is take the lowest common denominator, or the most extreme stance to make sure that they're meeting everybody's. I don't know if that makes sense, but to me that seems like, as long as it's not holding you back too much, that would be the easiest thing to do.
Yes, I'd like to know what can be done if bad guys get a hold of this information, and how they can use it, and what prevention we could have around that. So like criminals or hackers will get a hold of this and use it to use against people or companies. What kind of prevention could be done around that?
That's a great question, and one that people are spending a lot of time thinking about, it's probably similar to how it is now. You know, I'm not a Microsoft security expert, but we've got in Redmond, I can't remember what we call it, but like we've got a cyber crimes unit, and there's a lot of effort that we spend, you know, with Microsoft in, I think we even hire a ton of the hackers and bad actors, and to have them try to break our systems, and it's fairly incredible the focus that is on that. So I think that it would just be amplified. There is going to be risk, but there's just going to need to be focused technology and crime units and effort to protect the information.
There's a question over here.
I'll add one more thing. It kind of goes back to the designing of systems. So number one, you need to protect the data. But then when you're thinking about how AI is using the data, that's where that you can have the fallback things. So you need to make sure the software is developed so that if it doesn't work, or if there is a bad actor, that you've got safety things in place in the software itself.
Hi.
Hi.
Just judging from the demographic here, there's a lot of older people here, like myself, that are more interested in the applications for healthcare than where to buy the next neat pair of shoes, the consumer area. But I've got a question. I've got about 5 doctors. I've got a GP, cardiologist, dermatologist, et cetera, and I think a lot of us probably do too. When prescriptions are being made, when you're sharing information, it would be a good idea to be able to have all this information compounded into one particular area, so you're not being, say, prescribed something based on what one doctor thinks and not another. I'll give you another example. I've got a pacemaker, and for the past 3 years, there has been a machine sitting on my nightstand that transmits all of the information on my heart 24 hours a day straight. And it came up the other day that everything's going okay, but your battery is going to need to be changed at such and such a date, which is something that, I didn't know, but it's something that it should be known. I mean, there's some good uses of this type of information. But I guess my question is, what can AI do to consolidate a lot of this information based on, the fact that a lot of people have different doctors and different things, to come up with the best decision in terms of treatment?
I think, so the first thing that would need to happen is less about the AI and more about the hospital systems and them sharing information and the privacy, the security around that information sharing. And I agree, I think that would be great. And it seems like maybe we're getting there a little bit more, perhaps, when I'm thinking about like my legacy dashboard and being able to get information from multiple doctors. So I think there'd have to be something in place where they're sharing information confidentially. But that would be an example of the benefit of the large language model, because you've got multiple records from all of these different doctors, and because the AI can then research all of that quickly and pull together patterns and look for patterns, and that's really is the benefit, is being able to take advantage of all those documents out there. I think that if you're asking about, when I think about things like pacemakers or other medical devices, that is a good example of predictive technology. So again, going back more towards machine learning, it's got all of the data and the signals that it's getting from you and from the device itself, and being able to detect anomalies or look at predictive failure is just a common thing with machine learning anyway, whether it's about in a piece of equipment or equipment that you might use for healthcare.
A couple questions over here.
But the other side of healthcare, in terms of large data collection is, for instance, during the last pandemic, analyzing the data to decide who's more likely predictively to live or die based upon their symptoms, and making a decision then about how to use scarce resources like ventilators and so forth. Isn't that sort of predictive use a potential negative in terms of healthcare?
Absolutely. I think that's a big concern. And when we're looking again at the Microsoft principles, being able to design some of that ahead of time. So if you're I guess that would be kind of considered the bias or the fairness. So what you want to do is look at the models that you're creating, make sure that the data sets are valid and inclusive, and think about, and this is what the development teams do. So it's not just a pie in the sky. It sounds nice. It's a good idea. You don't want to have harm to people, but it's because it is one of our tenants, and probably similar with other technology companies, that the developers sit down and think about the possible harm and put mitigating things to. You're trying to figure out how that would work.
Well, except apparently this is one of the outcomes during the pandemic, is predictive, who's likely to live and die, and making these decisions about how we're going to use resources based upon that.
Let me put it this way. You're right. The systems can do that, but that's where the companies that use the systems need to control the outcomes of it. And whether it's companies that use the systems or develop it need to predict, not predict in the terms of machine learning, but need to think ahead about how it could be used for harm and not do that. I don't know, I guess that's, maybe that's where some of the regulation comes into play.
Thank you. I have a different question. What is the end game in this? There are two races going on. One race is to replace human beings with a machine. At the same time, our population has grown to 8 billion people. And like if you look 100 years back, we had physical hardship. And now we have mental hardship. When you say people are busy and they don't have time, what we are trying to do, that we are putting more and more work out of the people. When we didn't have a cell phone, we lived good. Now we have a cell phone, you are expected to answer 24/7. So what we are saying, that we're not reducing the number of employees, maybe one corporation, but generally in matter of population, that we are doing that. We are putting more and more work for the same person to do. I will give you another aid, I'll give you another gizmo, but you do keep doing more work. What is the end game of this thing? What do we gain as living, as a life quality? We are trading our physical hardship with mental hardship. Physical hardship is actually good for health, but mental hardship is degrading. Really, mental hardship is degrading the quality of life. So I don't know where we are ending.
Did you have a question? A particular question for her?
I hope not. No, I don't like-
Question is, what is the end game of AI? That's my question.
Very good.
I have no idea. Okay.
Next question.
So I was pleased about the concern to avoid biases, except biases are a function of one's background experience and demographics. So my question, I guess, is, what, if anything, is being done at Microsoft to obtain the input of demographics that may be underrepresented by the ones making the decisions? Does that make sense?
Absolutely. And I'm not sure if this exactly addresses this, but I'm glad you brought it up. One of the things that, so I'll get kind of to the bias thing, but I think it's related. Our big focus is on inclusiveness. And so in order to be inclusive, you have to understand what some of those maybe underrepresented populations are. And so at Microsoft, what the development teams are doing is making sure that they're pulling together, that they're including on the development teams those people, and so making them very diverse development teams so that they do understand. And I think Microsoft has actually been doing that, looking at that for a while. And it's our mission is to empower every person and organization in the world to achieve more, I believe, which might sound a little Sally Rally or something. But when I was thinking about it, it actually is important as from a business perspective, because Microsoft serves everybody across the world. So it's actually in Microsoft's best interest to understand a diverse point of view. And so it's not just doing it out of maybe the goodness of the heart, but it's in order to actually have the best outcomes as a company. We're going to make sure that there are diverse people on the team. And so that's what I think about from inclusiveness. And so from a bias, I believe it's kind of the same thing. It's upfront, having the engineering teams put together their plans and their intent, and really thinking through the potential biases and the harm, and either bringing the underrepresented folks on the team, or again making sure that their models and the data is being tested to make sure it's covering a broad spectrum.
I think we have time for maybe one or two more questions.
Some of the things that go through my mind when I think about the use of AI, because I've used it quite a bit so far, is something that many of us are impacted every day, and that is our email. And I've noticed a vast amount of spam coming into my email now, and I think it's AI generated. What do you have to say about that? Because this is something that affects everybody. And it's spam, it's phishing, they're trying to get my data. And some of it's even using my email. And so some things, I think that this is something we all ought to be alarmed about, and the use of it is nefarious for sure.
What I'm thinking about is, I get completely annoyed with that as well as junk mail in hard form. It just drives me crazy. But I think part of the problem is the individual companies maybe that are sending information to you. I know that sometimes when you've got the unsubscribe, and maybe this isn't where you're going, but I'm trying to think of how, when I'm looking at my super cluttered email, that I barely have anything that's a real email in my personal email, and where it's coming from. In my case, they're probably coming from when I made online purchases, when I was visiting certain websites, whether I'm using some apps, and you're thinking maybe that's not the case for you.
It's Hertz Rent-A-Car offering me medical insurance.
Yeah.
It's stolen emails or people making emails and really trying to spam us. It's really gotten bad. And all that's coming in my inbox, it doesn't go to other or spam anymore.
Yeah.
It doesn't go to spam, and it doesn't go to other. It's in my email, and I'm really concerned about that. And we own a business, and we've got people getting emails, and if they click on something wrong, then it's trouble in a box.
Yeah.
AI. You're using AI with your information to get information to you. That's exactly what the negative
Is
part is.
AI using my information?
Yeah.
What I would say is that there's a lot of companies that are leveraging AI to decide what information and proposals to push to you. And so that's where I kind of get to, where is the information? Yes, there's a lot of people out there that are trying to hack into our information, and so we need to be, consistently, trying to figure out how to solve that. But in the case where it's not fraudulent people hacking our information, then it's just information that companies get because of things that we've done. So it's, but yeah, I don't like it either.
I'm going to go back to the end game question, and our county commission chair, who asked it, just left, so too bad, he's gone. But there's so much talk about AI overtaking the human race. It sounds simplistic or impossible, but what I heard was you didn't have an answer for it, but somewhere within your corporation, somebody must be talking about it and either denying its possibility or saying, yeah, this is really frightening stuff. My question is it really frightening stuff? Should we be quaking in our sandals, in our slippers?
I think people are taking that threat very seriously, which is why a lot of our leadership is focused on looking at regulations and collaboration with different countries and different organizations to make sure that we still have control over it. Who knows? I mean, I'm a big science fiction fan, so I'm not going to say that something couldn't ever happen, but I think that's the reason why our leadership is spending so much time working with other tech companies too, our competitors and government, to try to think about how to go after this. I mean, I think it was Sam Altman, the CEO or founder of OpenAI, who was talking about creating a new government agency just for this sort of thing. So it's hard to know what could happen, but I think it seems to be a logical approach in going after it. And security. One of the things that Brad Smith was saying is, creating not just regulations, but licenses and huge focus on security. So if you think about some of the data centers that house all of this key data, making sure it's not just software protected from encryption and that kind, but actually making sure the facilities are really protected as well.
We have just one more question, I think.
My question is that there is a lot of data that AI is using. Mountains of it, you said, was huge. Mm-hmm. It uses a lot of electricity to process all that data. And we are now facing a big problem with our electricity. We have to drive electric cars, we have to get electric stoves, we have to have electric for everything. What is going to happen to our grid when everybody's electric and AI has used, right now they're using, I read somewhere, almost 50% of our electricity goes to AI work. So does Microsoft have any idea what is going to be the big impact of all this electricity use?
That is a great question, and I feel like I've seen that. I understand the concern. I definitely understand the concern. Capacity there's only so much. I would imagine that folks at Microsoft are thinking about it. I don't have an answer. I know in general we're focused on with our own data centers being carbon neutral, and there's a lot of focused, a lot of thinking on it. But I'm just not. I don't have visibility. But it seems like a extremely valid concern. So I hope someone's thinking about it.
Absolutely. All right, well, we are just about out of time here. So first, I want to thank Amy so much for starting this conversation with all of us. Really appreciate your time. I know the City Club Programming Committee is very interested in continuing this conversation, so look for future programs related to this topic. Also, the librarian and me just cannot let this go away. If you are seeing emails and it's weird, it's questionable, you have any question about that email, just delete it. Just delete it. Don't click on any links. Don't forward it to somebody else to take a look at it. Just delete that email. If someone really wants to get a hold of you, they will call you again or they'll send it to you again. Get rid of it. The other thing would be if you have any question about emails or websites you're coming across or things, come to the library and ask us to help you take a look at that. We have been learning a lot about information literacy and how to share those skills with you. I just heard from someone, one of our library patrons up in Point Roberts, who thought she was hacked and went to all these lengths. They wanted $30,000 in cash emailed from UPS from Point Roberts to unblock her computer. That was a complete scam. It was just a junk email, and she could have just deleted it. So save yourselves a lot of headache. Take your laptop and bring it into the library, and we will help you sort it out. So please, that's not necessarily AI related, but it is information literacy related, and that's my public service message for the morning. So thanks.